So just brief introductions. I'm Steve Rayson. I'm one of the directors and owners at BuzzSumo. You can always get me on Twitter or just mail me if you have any questions. My background is varied. I worked in e-learning, designing e-learning programs before I worked in marketing, and I worked as a consultant before that. But as I say, today really is not about me. A lot of you will have heard me before, but I'm really pleased today to have Dixon with us. So Dixon, I don't know if you'll say a few words of introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So I'm one of the early people at Majestic. When I started, it was really Alex working in his bedroom, and before that, I founded an agency called Receptional, which was way back in 1999, and I've been link building really ever since then. And when I saw Majestic and what Alex was building, I decided that was really interesting and figured I knew most people in the world that needed it, really. So that's kind of where I've been for 8 years, something like that now. Really, I've been involved in it.
That's great. So I tell you, Dixon's our expert today. So any questions about backlinks, he's really our expert today. So, and I'm going to chip in and ask him the difficult questions. Just to say why we're doing this with Majestic is we have a new partnership. I think a lot of you will know about it. But we've always provided data around social shares on BuzzSumo. But we know that's only one part of the picture, really. Shares are one part, but obviously links are an important second part of that picture. So we've now got a partnership with Majestic so that when you go to your BuzzSumo and you do a most shared search, you will see something that looks like this, hopefully. So you'll see both the total shares on the right-hand column, but you'll also see the number of linking domains. So that's simply, it's an odd term, but it simply means the number of links from unique domains. Is what that says. So it gives you a much more rounded picture of how content's performing. So it's getting shares, but is it getting links?
So we're really interesting as well to see these different. People are going to be very surprised to see the lack of correlation, and I think you've already done some correlation in previous life as well on this.
Yeah, we did a big study last year where we took 1 million random posts because we assume that if you've got a lot of shares, you get a lot of links, but actually that's not the case. So there is really very little correlation between shares and links, and we'll explore a little bit of that this afternoon. So it's good to get a more rounded picture. But we're really pleased with the partnership. We think it's a fantastic addition to the tool. But yeah, any feedback you have on it, let us know. But when you see that linking domains number there, that comes from Majestic. And if you want more detailed information around backlinks, etc., Dixon will show you some screens from their tool today. Do use their tool to get more information. So that's just by the way in terms of partnership. So in terms of what we're doing today, firstly is, I suppose the question before we start talking about what makes content link worthy, why would somebody link to your content, is why do links matter? Because I can now get 10,000 shares on Facebook and on Twitter. So Dixon, why do links matter at all? Why do I need to worry about links? Surely social shares are enough.
Well, I knew you were going to send that over to me, so I prepared the next slide, really. And really, the interesting thing about a link is that if you think about it from a human perspective for a second, before you click on a link on a web page, you have some idea about what that web page is going to be about, whether it's news or evergreen content, whether it's something in context, whether it's got meaning, power, passion. All of these adjectives here are adjectives, verbs. Oh, no, anyway, all these words here really are things that you know as a human being before you click most links. And what's really interesting is that if you know them as a human being, most of these could, in theory, be learned by machine learning algorithms like a search engine. So links really are the fabric of the internet. There's only two ways to go and get to somewhere. You click on something, which is a link, or type in www.yoursite.com. And so links remain hugely influential. And it's not just me that says that. If you take on to the next slide, all experts around the world still say that links are still hugely important as a ranking factor, as well as for visibility for your business online. And Eric is incredibly well regarded in the industry, but it's not just the likes of Stone Temple. If you go on to the next slide, it's also Googlers themselves. Google's Andrei Lipitsev said it just the other day. He said content and links, and I think since then Gary Iles has said that there's a third factor, rank brain, that is making up some of that factor. But I got a T-shirt just today, actually, from a colleague at SEOcom, which had Gary Iles saying it's very difficult to rank without links, and it was so important that he put it onto a T-shirt and gave it to me. So, on all sorts of levels, links remain very, very important. But they don't always, they're not always important in Twitter land or in BuzzSumo land, and maybe we can look at the differences between shares and links and why people do things.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I want a T-shirt as well. People don't send me T-shirts so much, so I need to get the T-shirt. So yeah, I wanted to look at why people link to content. We did this study last year, which talked about we expected a correlation between shares and links, and we didn't find it really. So we're a little bit surprised because some other people say they found it, but when we looked at the data, we didn't see it. And I think the reason there's not a strict correlation is because people share and link for different reasons, really. So if I take the left-hand column, why do people share content? They like to share entertaining content with their friends or their colleagues. They often do it to nourish relationships, to thank people, to share something. If they care about something, they share to get word out about that. And I'm sure we've all been in Facebook recently with the elections and everyone's sharing different views, etc., about stuff they care about. I think there's a work-related element as well. People share helpful and valuable content. They want to share something which is helpful to others. I think there's something also about identifying yourself, who are you, and I think sometimes people share just to say I'm part of this tribe, I support this view, to define themselves. So I think people share for those sorts of reasons, but there are lots of reasons they share, but people link to content, I think, for different reasons. So Dixon, what's your take on why people link to content?
We do have a question from the floor, and I think it fits here, so let me just read it out. Does the lack of correlation, lots of shares do not equal lots of links, apply if you're only looking at shares by influencers? That's from Kevin. So again, does the lack of correlation apply if you're only looking at shares by influencers?
I think you're going to find out by examples in a minute that no, it doesn't really matter about the influencer on that particular point. I think influencers are important, but unless you wanted to answer differently, Steve.
No, we found that it didn't really matter. Basically, we didn't find a correlation of shares and links, despite who was sharing. We did find some correlations on certain types of content, and we'll come on to that a little bit later.
Yeah, in fact, the next slide is going to show you some blinders. But let me just cover why people link to content. I don't know if it's a left brain, right brain thing, but I think that people link to content. If they're an authority themselves, then they will generally only link to content to support an argument, or will often link to support an argument. So citations of documents, that sort of thing. People do like to share authoritative content as well. So if there's research or facts and that sort of thing, then by sharing that content, they look and feel more intellectual, hopefully. I think people also share guides and valuable content like that, and then often evergreen content. I think we've got a couple of examples of that, as well as dynamic data. And dynamic data is interesting because you can't just tweet to it so easily. If it's dynamic data that's changing, you can't put the content directly into your article. You need to link to it because it's going to be changing the next time you see it. So there's different reasons why I think people link to content. I think we've got some excellent examples coming out. But in answer to the question that's just come up, maybe Steve, you've got some examples there, I think, of where correlations fail dismally.
Well, yeah, it's, I say we look at a mass of data and we didn't find correlations, but I wanted just to show some examples really, and we could ask you to put your answers in a chat box. You can if you want, but so this first one's an example. It's New York Times. It's an entertaining post really about orangutans, orphaned orangutans. It had 38,000 shares, so a lot of shares. But when we look at how many domains linked to that article, just one. So 38,000 shares, a lot of shares, just one link for entertaining content. The next one I've got on this example was an infographic. So for a content marketing infographic, 22,000 shares is really quite high, but only 4 links. So again, it's a form of content that gets well shared, but only 4 links. And just a couple more. List, of course, we know list posts do well in terms of sharing. People like to share list posts. They like to share list posts with the number 10. This is one from the Guardian newspaper. 10 tricks to appear more intelligent. I'm sure a lot of us need those. 43,000 shares. So it's a lot of shares. Just 7 links really.
I think out of the research, Steve, this is one of the most interesting things, because I think people assume that top 10, top 20, whatever lists get links a lot. And the research you put in there didn't bear this out at all. People like to quickly talk about them, and they're happy to share them. But I was surprised to see that the top 20 lists don't get links, because experts around have said that they do. And
I mean, I think some of them do. It depends, but on average, less so. Yeah. There's other forms of content that get links more. So if we take this last example, which is it's a viral quiz. It's a BuzzFeed viral quiz. Only a true poke master can score whatever on this Pokemon quiz. 134,000 links. People like sharing this stuff. My question to you is, 134,000 shares, that's a lot. How many people linked to that quiz? Just top of your mind, how many people do you think? See, the top one was 7. The answer is actually 0. Not a single link. And so I think they're just examples of 4 types of content which can sometimes get links, but the 4 types I've listed here, like entertaining content, infographics, list posts, viral quizzes, they're really well suited to shares. They get lots and lots of shares. They're not always so good at getting links. And so what we wanted to focus on today was what's the content that consistently does well in terms of links, really. So that's what we're going to focus on for the rest of the session. So we've taken examples and we're going to discuss them as we go, really, in terms of Dixon and I taking these through. So we've been doing lots of research. I've just spent months researching what sort of content gets links and what content gets links and shares, which would be great. And it's not always what you expect, really. So I wanted to start with the first one, which is one of the forms of content that consistently gets high numbers of links is actually really strong opinion posts, including political posts.
Have you got a good one for an example there, Steve?
Yeah, I've got a good one coming up on an example, because I think it's not always obvious that strong opinion posts might get shared well, but do they get links? In our experience, looking at the data, they actually get a lot of links. And I've got a couple of examples here. So the first one is topical, I suppose.
Can I just break in for a second? We did have one question just about what a link is, and so probably best to just do a real quick definition of it. A link is anytime a website links or puts a reference to another website in their content. So no worries if you weren't familiar with that. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's just effectively a hyperlink. So when you see it normally in a blue underline or something, so that you click on it and it takes you to the website. So it's a link from one website to another website, in essence. So I'm sure Dixon told you there are lots of different types of links, but in simple terms, that's a link from one site to another site. And they're not as easy to get as shares. I think it's also fair to say that it's quite easy to tweet something out, to reshare something on Twitter, to like something on Facebook or reshare on Facebook. A link involves a little bit more commitment, because you've got to have a site, you've got to put a link into your article that you're writing. So links are harder to get than shares. So I think it's worth remembering.
The author in doing that also leaves a legacy as well. So they've, if they link to something that's really, really bad, they're saying something about themselves as well. So you can get away with it in a Twitter feed that's gone 30 seconds later quite a lot. But yeah, putting that link down there says something about the person that's put it there. They've had to commit, as you say, Steve.
Yeah, and so this article, a number of you may well have seen this. This was a controversial article by Michael Moore earlier this year, 5 reasons why Trump will win. And you might think Michael Moore's site gets lots of shares and things, and often it does. So I look at these examples here. Typically some of his posts have had 134,000 shares. His second most shared was 134,000 shares. This one got 1 million shares. So it was controversial, it was out there. But look at the number of linking domains here, over 2,000. And if we go down the list, even when he's got almost 100,000 shares, he's getting 5 to 14 links from different domains. This one's got 200 times the number of links. So it's not, controversial posts don't just get shares, they also get links. And we were sort of debating why that is. I think it might be because it's a jumping off point for agreeing or disagreeing. You might share it and link to it because you agree with it. You might link to it because you violently disagree with it. But clearly there's something behind these strong opinion posts, because even looking at Michael Moore's site here in the top 3 most shared posts, those number of links are quite staggering. I don't know, Dixon, if you have any thoughts on that, why you think this one did so well?
It was a staggering example, and I think anybody that got that would be really pleased with themselves. Although Michael Moore is, of course, absolutely a contrarian and always has been. Of course, this article was backed up with a television program as well. So he had a not a television, he had a lecture, I think, which I saw on YouTube at least, or maybe one of those things. But certainly, it evoked debate, it evoked controversy, and people couldn't let it lie. People were just forced to discuss it on their own blogs, their own opinion pieces, of which, let's face it, during the election there was a huge number. There were also not that many websites that were arguing that Trump will win, and so he got a bigger share of the lion's share by going against the grain there.
Yeah, and just in case you think this is, okay, so Michael Moore's an exception, it's an exceptional post, etc. But I wanted to give you an example from our own space. Sorry, I meant to highlight that for you before. These are the top 3 most shared posts from a good friend of mine, Marc Schaeffer, who writes a lot about content, and his book, The Content Code, is excellent. And you can see that he's typically getting good numbers of shares, up to 9,000 shares of his posts. But the number of links, 5, 18, etc., not necessarily huge numbers of links, but good solid links. But he published a strong opinion piece. You could argue it's not controversial. Maybe it's controversial, maybe it isn't. So he wrote this piece saying content marketing is not a sustainable strategy. Basically, he called it content shock, which became adopted. So he said it's simply not sustainable. The shares weren't fantastic. You can see, just over 4,500 shares. But look at the number of linking domains, over 900 linking domains. I can tell you that that's more than half of the links to Marc's blog in total to that one article. That's how powerful one good post can be. So I think Marc in total's got about 1,500 links to his site from different domains. So this one post, over 900 links from a single article. So I think it can show the power of a good controversial post, which may be just taking a countervailing viewpoint. It may be being controversial, not necessarily for the sake of it, but to make people stand up and think, really. And this one created lots of debate. And so, for example, if you wanted to write a controversial post, I'm just suggesting ones here. So you could write a post, 5 reasons shares don't matter. You could be controversial. You'd have to back it up with evidence. But there is definitely some factual evidence from what we're seeing is that controversial posts that are sort of quite contrary don't only get well shared, but they also get linked to. So that was slightly surprising in terms of our evidence. But there are lots of other reasons. So let's look at some other reasons why content will get linked. So Dixon, over to you on this one.
So I've got a few here examples of where I think that dynamic content that is based on data is really powerful. And if you go on to the first one, it's one that a lot of us saw. I looked at this all the way through the election and was pretty influential up until they got it wrong. But even so, they didn't get it as wrong as many. And what this does is it was polling taking all the different polls, meta polls and things out there, but it was taking them out state by state as well. And so most of the websites and most of the polls were either just for one state or were for the country as a whole, and so they were tying it back to the number of electoral seats. And this became a very, very popular website and discussed website during the campaign. As you can see here, 4,500 linking domains coming into it. They got a lot of shares as well, but I think an incredible success story in terms of there are not a lot of polling companies that have got this amount of traction on the internet now. I don't know what you think there, Steve.
Yeah, and I think it links back to what you said before, is that whilst you can screenshot a snapshot of, this is the current opinion poll data, a lot of people linked to it because it was regularly updated. It was almost daily updated. So Nate was updating it virtually all the time. So people were linking to it because it changes. So it's like, if you want to see the latest, here's the link. Mm-hmm. And I think there is something about that dynamic content.
And they added commentary as well. It was pretty good.
Couple questions for you.
Yep.
What influence, this is from Greg, what influence do you think the TV show had on the volume of links?
That's presumably for the Michael Moore. It could have been Michael Moore, or it could have been for Trump. Clearly, the more you do have some audience, I think it'll increase the propensity for links. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing is that the people that watch television are not necessarily the people writing websites. So of course it will have it, but only one in X number of people actually bothers to write web pages or blogs at all. So so the impact is there, but it's diluted by the fact that not everybody can write websites.
When we did the analysis, we did look at different content formats. We didn't find that videos particularly got more links than other formats. So there didn't seem to be anything particularly special about video which influenced the numbers of links, certainly on the data that we looked at.
People are also asking, that's good. I think that's a really nice connection about, that it's not everyone who does write a website. But another question is about less famous bloggers with strong political opinions. So if you are less famous, but you still have a strong political opinion, do you think that you would get a lot of links too?
I think you would. I think the Marc Schaeffer one is an example. I mean, okay, Marc's sort of, I suppose, famous within a very particular small niche, but that was a post that got 4,000 shares. It's a reasonable number, but over 900 links. And I've seen it. You could say, but I'm not famous in our space. But I wrote a post a month or so ago saying why the future was more content, and that basically you get more shares, etc., more viewers, and more traffic if you publish more content than less content. So it was about more, not less, and quality content. So it was slightly controversial, and that's also already had about 150 links to it, which for us is very, very good on the BuzzSumo site. So I think even in your own space, sometimes being provocative, taking a controversial viewpoint, the data that I've seen suggests that you can get a lot more links for that. Obviously, you need to have an argument and back it up, etc. But there definitely seems to be evidence that controversy helps.
I think that authority element, that you have to back it up, is very, very important, because you don't become an authority unless you're backing up the things that you're saying, and that's what flips them from being opinion pieces to being authoritative pieces, is the backup, which of course usually means linking to somebody else, which is not something that everyone always wants to do. So I think everyone can become an expert at something, and they should try and be an expert at something if they want to succeed online. But you're going to have an advantage with a large website or a large presence. But these people didn't get their presence just by sitting around and suddenly being famous one day, except for Kim Kardashian. But here's another example. Not the next one. It's not quite people orientated, but it's still sticking with the dynamic data theme. But I'll explain why it connects in a second. So here I've just presented the AccuWeather website, and I've just presented the data in a different way using the Majestic toolbar, which you can put into Chrome. We're updating Firefox as well right now, and should have an Opera soon as well. So here this is a very, very popular dynamic data website, because of course the weather is constantly changing. So there's a lot of external backlinks going through there. There's some 71 million backlinks from 100,000 domains. So big linking data. But you do need authority to really make it work for you. So if you go on to the next slide, exactly the same content, but now it's got the BBC name behind it, and you can see a huge number of extra links coming in. And I reckon that's largely because it's got the BBC name behind it. So the authority still is important. But of course, people can't just put the picture of the weather on their website, because tomorrow it'll be different.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think the point about authority is, hopefully we all have authority. We're not the BBC, for example. We're not Michael Moore, in our own BuzzSumo, but we are an authority in our own little way. So we know a lot about shareable content if we're BuzzSumo, so we can write content and data about that. So I think you've got to think about areas where you have authority. It'd be no good us trying to write something more general about SEO. That's not our specialism, but we do know an awful lot about shareability of content, for example. So and each of us in our own websites, our own industries, will have some element of authority. So I think it is thinking about, where do you have credibility if you're going to write regularly updated content, and that can include guides as well. We've added this one here. This is a guide that doesn't stay static. It's actually regularly updated, and when you get guides that are regularly updated, people continue to link to them because it's always got the latest version there. So this happens to be, a very popular beginner's guide to SEO, and I think we often forget also that there are always beginners coming into our marketplace. There are always people who are new to it, and sometimes it may seem old hat to us, but it's new to other people. And this one, for example, this has got 2,500 linking domains, so it's just an example. It's regularly updated content, but it's got quite a lot of links.
And it's a brilliant one, and it also has got to the top of the search engines, so it then becomes self-sustaining, because it's now become an authoritative guide that is now a citation in its own right, which I think is excellent.
Great. So another area which I think comes up a lot, and all of the evidence that we did when we did the study last year is one thing that always gets more links seems to be research and insights. So original insights and research always seems to get well linked to. So here's an example from Pew Research. Obviously, they're a big research organization. This is research showing that millennials are now overtaking baby boomers as the largest generation. And I'll show you lots of different examples, including small ones. But research, people seem to really like to, and I think they reference it. They like to reference it, I think, and that's what Dixon was saying about, reference and back up facts that you're making or arguments you're making in posts. And this is just an example. Again, it's good shares for the site, but not outstanding, sort of 8,000, but 1,700 links there. So research, again, and this is an authoritative research, that seems to work really well. So, and again, you don't need to be Pew Research. You can do your own research. So I mentioned, what we do. So we did research just using BuzzSumo data. Now you could do exactly the same research because you've got the same data that I've got looking at BuzzSumo. So I just pulled lots of data. I pulled about 1 million posts at random and found that 50% of all those posts actually got 8 shares or less, which meant that most content marketing is failing, I think. So it's slightly controversial. So content's failing. So this was on our blog a year ago. Our blog is not huge. But even for us, that got 254 links so far from linking domains. So, if you run a website, you'll know how hard it is to get backlinks to your site. So if you can get 200 odd links for one article, it really is fantastic. It adds so much power and ranking juice to your site. So you can use your own research, but you can use other people's research. You can take data out of BuzzSumo. And I'll give you a really good example. BuzzFeed wrote an article on Thursday or Friday last week. It was Friday. Susan can correct me, on fake news on Facebook, on how it gets shared. They took all that data from BuzzSumo. So if you've read that BuzzFeed article on fake news and how fake news got more shares than real news, not a surprise really in some ways. It's easy to write a viral headline when you're not tied to facts. But interestingly, BuzzFeed took all that data from BuzzSumo. So you can do the same. You can take data and do research from BuzzSumo, from Majestic, from other sources of data, and you can publish it out. So it doesn't have to be your data. You just have to do some research, which is interesting and insightful to people. And I think the BuzzFeed example of fake news using all of our data is a good example of that.
I add a thought there, Steve. I mean, a really good way of making yourself unique as well is to take 2 different data sources, and I think that's what we've done here with the partnership. We've been able to do some analysis of shares and links, and we've taken 2 data sources and created something that we hope is, at least you and I hope, is new information for us all. And I think that it's very easy for anybody out there to take, as you say, BuzzSumo data or Majestic data, and then mix it with 538.com data or another data source to create a new bit of information. And it's just a case of analyzing something that no one's looked at before.
Yeah, and it could be particular to your particular niche. It could be, the most shared content about, I don't know, dog training or whatever it happens to be. If it's useful to people, people like original research. And just another simple example here. This is from Social Media Examiner. It's their annual report. They do a survey. Some of you may take part in it and complete that survey. They do an annual survey about the state of the market. And again, you might think, well, they're a big site, and they are. Typically, there are a lot of articles here getting 7,000 shares. This one also got 7,000 shares. But if you just look into that penultimate column there on the right, look at the number of links that article got. So it's got over 500 linking domains. Other articles are still doing well. Generally, Social Media Examiner does well because it does lots of practical content. If you look at the top and bottom one here, they do lots of really good content on how to do this, how to do that. So they're good practical content that people like to link to. But take this one, similar shares, but because it's an original piece of research, it's referred to a lot, 500 links. So I think this thing about just thinking about what you can do in your space, what data do you have, or what data can you access, what sort of insights would be useful for your audience, because there's a lot of evidence that research and insights, people link to it. Yeah. Another one is just practical updates on new developments. I'll let Dixon talk this one through.
Yeah, so this is clearly news generates links, especially if it's industry-specific news. I think if you're the first person to come out with useful content or useful news, people tend to link to it a lot. So this is an example of Google coming out with Rank Brain, but really, Danny Sullivan, well known within the SEO industry, got the story first, went into some depth with it, and because it had a shock. That all of a sudden it was part of the ranking algorithm. There you go, 1,000 links through to it, and for even for search engine land, that's a lot of links. They do tend to get some good shares, and sometimes they get good links. But the story was news, and it came from an authoritative source. And there are times when, if you've got some product development of your own, if you can actually go and get an authority in your industry to talk about it instead of you, then it may be worth getting all the links to that authoritative source, because that authoritative source comes with power as well.
Dixon,
Yep.
let me jump in there, because I think that's relevant to a question that Mark is asking. He's asking, how do you distribute your posts in the first place so that you get this exposure? Would either of you like to address, how you plan to distribute content?
I'll tell you exactly succinctly how I do mine. So I have a list of around about 20 people in the industry, in my industry, that I think are very important, including Search Engine Land, Search Engine Journal, those kind of people, and it's a very short list. But when I've got new product coming out, because that's how we generate content, is when we have actually something to launch, I send the message out 3 or 4 days before the actual launch, saying, this is the page I'm going to put on the blog, this is the content on it. If you want to talk about it in advance, that's great, because actually I don't mind that. If you're going to talk about it on the day or prepare the blog and then link to me, then that's even better for me. But really, I would rather the influencers talk about my content than me, but that's because I'm not a content guy, I'm a technology guy. So it may be different for you, Steve.
Yeah, I think it's a really important question, because for me, one of the big mistakes people make is they don't think enough about content amplification before they write content. And I say this a lot, and that applies to links as well as to shares. So I think if you want to get people sharing to it, linking to it, you do need to build an influencer base that you might work with around an article, but you need to be thinking about, who's going to share this, whether it's a link or whether it's on Twitter, and why are they going to do it. And I think you do need to plan that amplification. Personally, I think there are lots of other things you can do as well. You can do things like, for example, if it's an important blog post, we would email people. If you're on our email list, you'll know that we do this. We might email you saying we've written this new article, and we will promote it that way because we have an audience who are generally interested in what we're writing about. So I think email lists are just so important. I can't overstate how important I think simple email lists in, building your email list, because it's a great way of being able to drive out not all of your content, but once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and really promoting a particular post. And I also think all of us start to ignore Facebook at our peril, even if we're in business-to-business marketing. On BuzzSumo now, I think about 1/3 of our shares come through Facebook. So I think you can think about boosting posts on Facebook as well. I know a lot of B2B people say it's really just about LinkedIn, etc., but Facebook is so huge. I'm just personally seeing more people share business stuff on their Facebook and interacting with it. So you could think about boosting posts there, etc., as well. So, but I think the key is, before you even start writing the article, who's going to link to it, who's going to share it, start working on your amplification strategy, so that the worst thing in the world is to spend a lot of time writing content and it doesn't get shared or linked to, because you could end up wasting your time. So you've got to think about the amplification. So
and there's a real trick to it, really, because if you get the influencers, as soon as somebody lower down the pecking order, I don't know what the pecking order is, by the way, but the lower down the pecking order,
it's probably me.
That's it. Then the person higher up in the pecking order says, oh, okay, it's not news anymore because somebody else, and it's all about perception. But if the person that is the key influencer in your sector talks about it first, then everybody underneath doesn't mind rehashing that or talking about that again. Once it goes from the bottom up, then that's a mistake, because it's secondhand news to the guy at the top.
I think there's nothing about this whole area which is about being fast. If you're going to do something about news, you have to be fast. So I've seen some good examples of it. So, we all know that Mary Meeker does her Internet Trends report. I've seen some really good examples of news hijacking working where somebody gets that report the instant it's out and writes about the implications of this report for e-learning, for marketing, etc. And they really do the research for their audience, saying, look, I've read it, I understand it, these are the implications for marketers. And I think there are times when you can jump on, but if you're going to do that, you have to be fast, and not all of us have the resources for that. Another area, just to sort of move on in terms of time, is I think this is neglected a lot, which is answers to questions. And it could be even basic questions, but answers to questions get linked to, particularly if you're an authority in that space. And so there is a downside. You have to be an authority on the question you're writing about. The classic example I've used a lot before, so some of you may have seen it, is this is a simple post from Content Marketing Institute. It just says, what is content marketing? It's actually a really short post, but it's quite an authoritative post about what is content marketing. And as a consequence, lots of people link to it. Again, you can see it here. It's only had just under 6,000 shares, which is not huge in the context of CMI, but look at the number of links, 2,500 links for a very short article. And I think we often neglect, what questions people coming into your industry are asking. So it could be, what is a backlink?
What is a link?
What is a backlink? What is shareable content? If you have authority in a particular area, maybe there are questions that you can answer. And I think sometimes we want to write the big strategic post, and sometimes we miss out on something which is more evergreen, which people constantly refer to. Now, it would be hard. It'd be hard for us as BuzzSumo to say, there's no point in us probably writing one about what is content marketing because CMI is there, but we probably could do something about what is shareable content or something along those lines. I think you've got to think about, what are the opportunities, and so just think about what questions are your customers asking that would be useful for you to answer. So I think it's definitely something you can do. And here's another example, which I know Dixon you can refer to, which is this is Harvard Business Review. Again, it's an article that it got a reasonable number of shares relative to others, but huge numbers of backlinks.
I think this is a very good one, and it is really somebody right at the top of the game. Clayton Christensen is a lecturer at Harvard, but he's come out with an answer to a definition of disruptive innovation, which is a term in MBAs, and the reason I picked this one is because this was actually I think Steve picked it, but I'd actually read this article because it was required reading almost for an MBA course that I'm doing. So, that's what authority does. It becomes so important that, it gets linked to, and universities say, go read this. And that's a really good example of if you answer a proper question and give some really good insight, you're going to get links. It's going to become the authority.
Yeah, and I would make the point again about Facebook here, because Harvard Business Review is generally for businesses. It's generally business-to-business content. But if you look down that list there, that left-hand dark blue column is the number of Facebook interactions, shares, likes, and comments. And you'll see that, interestingly, they're much the same as LinkedIn. I mean, they're much higher than Twitter. Both networks in business-to-business are much bigger than Twitter. But, again, I would not ignore Facebook in terms of a distribution platform for this style of content. Either. So yeah, just think about questions, I think. Sorry.
Oh yeah, question from thanks. Joshua is asking, do social media platforms does Facebook look at links when they evaluate what to put at the top of their newsfeed, or are they only looking at shares?
I don't know. It's not public what's in their algorithm, so it's difficult to know exactly what they look at.
What I will say, a different question is that we don't crawl Facebook because you have to be logged into Facebook. So we would see every individual. So our crawlers wouldn't see those kind of links. But that's a different question there.
If you want to look at it, we do have data on public Facebook posts. If you use the BuzzSumo Facebook Analyzer, we can show you the most interacted with posts, even if they include links. My instinct is they take account of links, because if you click a link in Facebook, I don't know if you're aware, but if one of your friends shares a link, as soon as you click that link in the post, Facebook instantly drops down 2 or 3 relevant links below the article. So I've noticed this recently. So if you click on a link, it'll instantly show you behind 2 or 3 relevant articles to it. So it clearly is doing something with it. I suspect it does, particularly if people click on those links. So I think we know that Google does this. If obviously people click through and then they look at dwell time, So I suspect it matters, but it's a bit of a secret what goes into the Google algorithm, the Facebook algorithm, of course. So, and there have been calls for it to be more transparent. Angela Merkel over in Germany has said, we should be transparent because Facebook claims to not be a publisher, but it's effectively publishing content to your feed, and it's deciding what you see. And the whole Facebook news, fake news story was all controversial because of that, really, saying Facebook decides what you see, so maybe it just puts more pro-Trump articles and more anti-Trump articles, maybe because your friends are more pro or anti-Trump. So, and there's a lot of call for more transparency. Whether we'll ever get that, I don't know.
On that question, there was actually some discussion on that as to whether links would be or could be a good validator for whether news is actual news or not for the Facebook algorithms. So there's been some sort of discussion around that. Obviously, I hope they use my data if it is.
Yeah, I hope they don't use shares, because what we found is that when you write a fake article, like the Pope endorsed Donald Trump, which was a popular one, that got masses of shares because people don't check that it's true, and it actually got far more shares than the real content. So I'll be nervous if they start using shares, because shares, I think, are almost the reverse indicator, possibly. Just finally, another quick one, because I'm conscious of time for people. We're coming up to sort of 45 minutes. Another one that we find gets a lot of links are reference tables and guides. We talked about guides before. I've talked earlier that infographics generally, in my experience, don't get so many links, but there are exceptions to every rule. This is a good reference, effectively an infographic from search engine land. Because it's an infographic, it got incredibly well shared. Infographics do get well shared. So if we look at this, 30,000 shares, even for search engine land, that's huge. I think it's probably their top one ever. But it also got lots of links. And I think it's because it got lots of shares because it's infographics. They're really designed for sharing. But I think it's a good reference resource. I don't know whether you had any views on that, Dixon, but I think that's probably why that one did so well in terms of links.
No, I do, and I think we should move on rather than dwell too much.
Okay, so just questions for you as an audience, really, which is a lot of you here will be writing content. You'll be working on a blog post, or you'll be planning your next blog post. So my question to you is, will your next post be link worthy? Will people link to it? And I think if people are going to link to your next post, it probably needs some of these elements within it, or at least one of these elements within it. So, are you answering a question that's commonly asked in your space? Is your next piece of content, is it a strong opinion post? Is it controversial? Is it a counter viewpoint to what everybody else believes? Are you providing original research, or are you providing original insights to your audience that they then might link to? Is it practical? People do link to practical how-to content and guides. We saw an example there of the SEO beginner's guide, for example. So does it meet that criteria? And as Dixon mentioned a couple of times, what about dynamic content, regularly updated content? Is it an updated list? And I know sort of movie databases do this, the latest top films, etc. You have to go back to the same link each time. So in thinking about your next post and whether it's going to acquire links, does it have some of these features to it? And I think they're things that are worth thinking about before you even start writing your content. And that's not to say you might not want to do a viral quiz, because a viral quiz can gain you a lot of awareness, can get you people to see your name out there, etc., can build your brand. But a viral quiz is very, very unlikely to get you links. So if it's links you're after, you really need to be thinking about the type of content that you're creating. And a way you can quickly do this, now that you've got both links and shares on BuzzSumo, what I would suggest is just put your domain into BuzzSumo. So put your domain in there, like buzzsumo.com, and you can then see your own content. What of your content's getting shares? What's getting links? You can do it for your competitors' domains. What's working for competitors? So it enables you to do an assessment. So if you can just start somewhere, I would say just simply open BuzzSumo now, type in your domain or your competitors' domains, or you can use the OR operator, buzzsumo.com or majestic.com. And then you can compare the content and whether it's getting shares and links. So that's all we wanted to cover today, but we're now here to answer any questions other than where to find true love, which we may struggle with that one, but on the other questions, hopefully we can help. But thank you so much for your time and listening today. I hope it's been interesting and of use to you. But Susan, any more questions that we need to pick up?
Yeah, we have a couple. And in case people are wondering, you will get a recording of the webinar. It usually takes us about 24 hours to get the recording and the slides out to you. So definitely watch your inbox for that. Another question is from Twitter. With the growth of texting apps like WhatsApp, how will you measure engagement and content success going forward?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. We don't have a complete picture, and that's true. I mean, we don't have it because there's sort of what people call dark social, where people email links, and we don't see that either. Increasingly, we may see stuff shared in other formats, whether it's through things like WhatsApp. Interestingly, on Instagram now, they're allowing you to put in links as well there on the storage side of things. So there are increasingly ways in which people can share and distribute content. So we have to keep an eye on that. We have to look at the Instagram developments, etc., to see how we can pick it up. But at the moment, we don't pick that up. That said, I think the overall numbers of shares do give you an indication as to what sort of content's resonating. If something's getting suddenly, 10,000 shares and 1,000 links, etc., you know they're doing something right. So it does give you a broad indication, but it's a good question. To be sure, we're still missing elements of that picture.
Thanks. Yeah, this one might be more of a question for Dixon. I'm not sure. Can you speak to the value of syndicated versus unique links?
Well, I would quite happily say, go for unique links. I think one of the problems with syndicated content is that it's very easy for it to very quickly become low quality content. So if it's syndicated out onto an awful lot of websites, then everybody knows news and they only need to see it once. So I'm not a big fan of syndicated content. I think in terms of how our data interprets it, we have some metrics that help us to analyze the difference between what we think is good content and what we think is possibly less trustworthy content. So we have in our data two different numbers between 0 and 100 for every page on the internet. One's called citation flow and one's called trust flow, and there's some different modules on it. But the thing is, citation flow is really a propagation of the number of links to every web page on the internet. So we propagate that information, which is sort of similar to the original PageRank algorithm. So the more links you get, the more your citation flow will go up. Trust flow is a little bit cleverer, and it tries to anchor that information at its source by a website that we know a human being wrote. So syndicated content tends to not have many human beings involved. So in our data, we would see it as trust flow staying low and citation flow running up with all the links that are getting generated. Google obviously has different methodologies for working out good and bad, but it's based around the same basic principle that if you're going to automate the information, it's not as important, probably.
Great, thank you. Here's another one. What should people do with a piece of content which has gotten many backlinks but which is temporary? This person, Francois, is saying, we have live social media dashboards which get great backlinks, but once the event is passed, should we delete the page or should we redirect? Should we keep the page and add content on it? If you'd like, I can repeat it.
No, I think the question, I've got a view, but it may not be the right view. If you've got the time and the energy and it's generated a large number of links, then what you could leave is a legacy report of that content. So if it's a social event like the Wimbledon tennis, for example, then you could leave a legacy bit of information there. And a good example of that, I think, is 538.com's website there. The event has passed, but I reckon that's going to remain there and be valuable for many, many years to come. So you certainly don't want to lose the actual page if you can help it. If you do lose the page, you've got to 301 it to some other content that's relevant, and that may mean sort of leaving some kind of legacy report for people to get download.
Great.
Another idea.
Here's one that will test your powers as a predictive agent, like 538. I'm writing a post on 7 tech bargains to look out for in the UK on Black Friday. Is this likely to gain shares and links? So we want a prediction on the success of that post. What do you think?
I think it will get some shares and it will probably get very few links, if any links, because links take time to build. That's the other thing. Shares are quite instant. They go very quick. And if it's about the event this Friday, you're not going to get many links between now and Friday. And post-Friday, it's probably not that relevant to link to if it's about the best bargains on Black Friday. So it's a very time-limited piece of post. So typically, in my experience, Dixon may contradict me, but in my experience, evergreen content's more likely to gain links or content with longevity than something which is about a sale tomorrow. It might get a lot of shares in the short term, so I'm not saying it's not worth doing because it may get a lot of shares, but in terms of links, my prediction would be you're probably not going to get many links to that piece of content.
Yeah, and I think that the evidence that we've seen in the slides today really backs that up. You know, we started, I think, by saying top 10s, you know, don't get the links that we thought they were going to get. But you're now combining that with a time-delimited factor as well, time-constrained factor. So I think you will have trouble getting links for that post.
Great.
You could then do a retrospective post, which may have a much longer lifespan, which is about the history of Black Friday deals or something like that, something which has a longer lifespan, which people can reference. But if it's just about the best deals on Black Friday, that day will pass. And links, it is interesting, if you look at the acquisition of links with Majestic, you can see as links are acquired, and typically they take a bit more time to acquire a link than it does shares. Shares tend to explode quite quickly, tend to die off quite quickly. Links build over time and tend to keep building if it's a good post.
There's also some lag in our data, of course, because we've got to crawl the link, process a link, and bring the information forward, so it's not coming in instantly as well. So you may get links, but we don't have a chance to see it before, you know, next Monday. But
yeah, good. So here's one more about quantity, quality, and the types of content that get links. In terms of building authority, would you say that quality will do far more for your strategy than quantity? In other words, would 2 or 3 quality blog posts a week do more than blasting out 8 or 9?
In my view is absolutely. My view is if you're trying to build authority, that's absolutely the way to do it. And even 2 a week could be a lot. You don't need many if they work well. I mean, I go back to that Marc Schaeffer post or that piece of research that I did. I say for us to get 200 backlinks from a single article is fantastic. That's much more valuable than doing dozens of posts that get 1 link each, for example. So I think if you're after building authority, quality matters, and original research, original insights, that all builds your authority. So I would say definitely that's the way to go. If you simply after traffic, there is a case about producing quite a lot of content. As long as it's at a certain threshold level, I think there is an argument that as soon as you've got a certain threshold level, you can produce quite a lot of content, and that will drive up traffic. But that's different from building authority.
That's great.
Yeah, I think the quality just will stand out. I think one of the problems with creating quantity as well, if you're trying to create quantity for links, then you will tend to use some fairly loose, free and loose methodologies for getting the links as well. And then what happens over time is that you're using methodologies that get links that are not necessarily quality, but what happens after lots of content is the same people are linking to the same content all the time, and you start thinking that you're getting lots of links, but actually it's really the same cohort of people, so you're not expanding your audience at that point, and Google sees it as a bit of a closed loop.
Yeah, that's great. Now, we do have several other questions, but I think we're going to have to limit to just one more in light of time. So let's go with this one. And it is, could you comment on link acquisition efforts versus content marketing?
Yeah, I'm not sure the difference always. Maybe there's, I mean, for me, I suppose there's something about, I've talked about content amplification, and link outreach is part of that to me. So I think there are ways in which you can do you can actively seek links back to your content. So if for those of you who use BuzzSumo, you'll know that we have alerts, for example. So we have an alert for BuzzSumo. We can see every time somebody mentions BuzzSumo in the body of a post. You just set up an alert for your brand. We'll show you every time somebody mentions you. But we can also see, because BuzzSumo shows us, whether they link to us. And the easiest links to gain for me in terms of link outreach is where people mention you but don't link to you, because you can send them a nice mail saying, thank you so much for mentioning us. It might be helpful to your readers if you can include a link. And often we'll get people then include a link. So you can actively do link outreach, and I think you should be doing that as well if you see those opportunities where people mention you but don't link to you. Also, if you can see other content getting links, you might want to reach out to see if they would link to you. And there is still place for certain types of directories, etc. So there is definitely space for link outreach. But I would see that, to me, that's part of content marketing. Part of content marketing to me is I've got to do the research, I've got to do the creation of the content, I've then got to amplify the content, and link outreach and influencer outreach are all part of my amplification strategy. So to me, I suppose I see them as part of the content marketing process. But Dixon, how do you see it?
Yeah, no, I see it the same, and we also have a link alert system, and I find, but I use your BuzzSumo stuff because it's quicker. You get the message out, your stuff comes to me quicker. But where I use the link alerts in Majestic is when I look at competitors' links and where they're getting the links from, because there may be conversations that have been built up which I should be involved in but weren't aware of. So it's kind of used for two different purposes. So my link outreach, though, I think is all about timing. Who do you tell and when? Well, it's both. Who do you tell and when? So those two things are really where the outreach goes, but it's still predicated on the fact that you've got good link-worthy content. So you still have to start with the BuzzSumo part of the puzzle, if you like, to create good content, because on that, if you don't do that, you're building your business on sand.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I'm sorry we haven't got through all the questions. So if you do have questions, do mail us, do tweet us, and we'll try to get back to you. But I just want to say a really big thank you to Dixon for joining us today, and I'm sure this won't be the last. We'll do more webinars together. Really enjoyed doing it. So thanks very much for that, Dixon, and also thanks to Susan for keeping us in check and making sure we picked up the questions. Susan will also be sorting the recording that you'll get in the next day or so. But just to say, really big thank you for your time this afternoon. I hope it was of interest, and as I say, any questions at all, just shoot them over to any of us, and we will try to get back to you as soon as we can. So thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dixon. Thanks, Steve.